Introduce you heard the great music, this great score here. He's done movies like Steve Jobs and Ocean's 8, All the Money in the World, several things. Please welcome Daniel Pemberton. And then we have 3 directors here, so it takes a village to make a movie like this. This is a big achievement from a lot of people. So first off, let me introduce Peter Ramsey. And Bob Persichetti. And also a co-writer of the film, as well as the director, Rodney Rothman. And then we have 2 producers. They are so talented. They do so many great movies, from live action and animation. You all know the Lego Movie. You all know Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, 21 Jump Street, so many great things that they've done, and now Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So first off, producer Chris Miller. And co-writer and producer Phil Lord. All right, well, let me start with you, Phil. You know, this is so, I saw this movie when it wasn't quite finished, and it was so great. And now I was watching much of it from the back there, and it looks spectacular. It really does. It's a very unique looking movie in this regard. You know, it's CGI and it's hand crafted as well, in traditional animation too.
Yeah, we wanted you to feel the hand of the artist who made this movie communicating directly through the screen. So we did everything we could in the production to make the images as expressive as possible. So there's a combination of CGI technology and the animators and the painters and lighting artists drawing directly onto the frame.
Yeah, and it looks spectacular. It looks like the comic books. You know, it looks like the graphic novels. It's got that beautiful kind of different look than you've seen before, but of course this is very unique too, seeing something that we've seen live action movies, a lot of them on Spider-Man, but this is a foray into animation. So what drew you 2 guys to the idea that you were going to be the ones that come in to make this particular movie, and what was your criteria in taking it on?
Well, there are 2 things that got us excited when Sony came to us and said, what about doing a Spider-Man movie animated? The first thought was exactly what you're saying, was, well, animation is a medium that we could push in a way to tell a story like this in a way that you've never seen before, in a way that feels like every frame is a painting. And so that got us really excited, just how groundbreaking it could be visually. But what really got us interested in doing it was the idea that we could do a Miles Morales story. So we went back to them and said, okay, we'll do it, but only if you let us make the movie look as outrageous as we want it to look, and also it has to be about Miles. And they said, okay. And we went, oh really? Oh, okay. But it really, yeah, but at the heart of it, the book that Miles Morales is the character that came onto the scene in 2011 became incredibly popular immediately because it was really compelling, and he had a really interesting family dynamic, and we loved the book, and we thought that there was this beautiful story about a father and a mother. First of all, having parents alive is a rarity in the world, but that they're so loving to him, but they don't know exactly the right way to do it. And then the relationship between them and him and his uncle felt like it was a great basis for a movie to build off of.
And so much diversity in this, right, with the Miles character. He's Afro-Latino character, which I've not seen on the screen, certainly not in animation in any big way here. And then beyond that, Asian American characters all down the line. This has really got some great character work here across the board that people are going to be able to see themselves in here.
Yeah, that was the message, or the idea, the theme of the movie that we had all along. That really started with Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's original creation of having democratized the idea of being a hero, that you weren't leaving it to some elite person, but that any regular person, it could be you, and it is you, and you're not alone, and we're all counting on you.
Yeah, and you mentioned Stan Lee. We just lost Stan Lee, but he lives on with all of these movies. And when I saw this movie, he was still alive, and I just looked at it and I thought, wow, this is the best Stan Lee cameo I've ever seen. It really is a clever one. And so how did you decide to do that? Talk about Stan Lee a little bit, and then we're going to go down the line and talk about the rest of the movie.
I mean, I think we all just felt that because Stan is the godparent of all of these characters, and he did such an amazing, beautiful thing by telling a story of a superhero who was a regular person, who was flawed, who was funny, and he meant so much to all of us here in terms of his writing and how it influenced us, that he had to do something in the movie that it was more than just like being the bus driver, that he really needed to be a guy who helped Miles activate his the next chapter of his life, and we all came up with this idea that he should give him his suit, and he should be the guy that tells him it's going to fit someday, and then I think Chris had this joke that you can't return it.
Yeah, and so it turned out, obviously, when we did it, it was always really intended to be honoring his legacy and really inspirational and also funny. But then, obviously, after his passing, it took on a whole added extra layer of poignancy, and it's kind of eerie, having his first line be, "I'm going to miss him." But I think it still stands as the tribute that we wanted it to be.
Yeah, it went from people like cheering, and now they applaud, but after that first line, everybody just goes, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah, it was cool. And at the world premiere yesterday, you were all wearing sunglasses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, little pins.
Yeah.
In honor of him. Rodney, let me ask you about the script, first of all, that you did with Phil here, because it is hilarious, and it's so good. It's such a smart script standing on its own. You've worked with these guys before, 21 Jump Street, different things, and many movies. Other than that, talk about the approach to the script and what you wanted to put in this from that point of view.
Well, I mean, I'd say a lot of the challenge with this script was balancing all the tones that we wanted to balance. The comics that this is based on, has a very touching dynamic and story between Miles and his father, his mother, his uncle. That was really the heart of the movie. So, the jokes, it's kind of always the approach, the jokes you almost add last. You always come up with funny ideas along the way, but you almost put them in a bucket on the side, and you really want to focus on what the dramatic spine of the movie is, and that was particularly important with this one. So I'd say a lot of the time was just spent talking about story and just talking about how to tell the story of this kid. And one of the interesting things about Miles is that he's not a character that comes out and tells you anything he's thinking. He actually internalizes quite a lot of stuff, which makes him really interesting, but also makes it harder to dramatize what's happening, which is why we have so many foils and mentors around him. It gives, that's sort of our technique for letting him talk to people. But that was the big challenge throughout the writing process. Ultimately, once we had this story, once we really figured out, and it took a while, that it was all about Miles, all about his family, everything kind of had to reflect that. Then it was a balancing act to figure out exactly in what moments we could go funny, what kind of funny we could go. It wasn't the kind of thing where we just threw jokes at every moment. It was like a weird recipe where if you put the wrong, super funny jokes that just in the wrong moment seemed to upset some mysterious balance. So
I think one of the tricks was that, and we came up with this together in all of us in a room, trying to find comedic moments that expressed the relationships in the story, which is where that bit of Miles' dad, over the PA, asking him to say he loves him in front of the whole school. Like that joke lives in the movie and lands so strongly because it is expressing something that we're all witnessing. And if it was just a goof, then it just didn't seem to stick to the screen. We wanted to draw it.
Yeah, well, you're right. It seemed like you're not thinking about a joke. You're thinking about, what it's like to talk to someone when, when you're not saying anything, you're actually thinking or feeling, and it's super real, like a parent. That's certainly what we were thinking about when we wrote that scene. Was what does it feel like to talk to a parent when there's so much going on set? And the same thing that I'm a dad. As a father, what's it like to be talking to your kid and to want to protect them and to want to tell them what to do, but you kind of can't, So it wasn't until we locked into that thing that some of those jokes started to come.
How did you create the whole universe of all these Spider-Mans and things? And they're so great and they're so different. You've got Nick Cage's voicing the noir, Spider Noir, and I love Spider-Ham. I mean, that's right out of a Looney Tune or something. That's a crazy character right there, and all kinds of different female across the board. How did you decide how are you going to put all them?
I mean, the disappointing answer is it's all from the comic books. All of it.
This is a straight adaptation.
I mean, it's a twisted adaptation, but every character, even the concept of, although when Phil was working on this part, Phil, I think you can speak to this, but he started to play with the idea of a Peter Parker being older, being a mentor, without knowing that had actually happened in the comics also. Everything has happened in the comics. So it's all from the comics. But that said, it's like, to tell a multiverse story, that was another challenge we had, was trying to figure out, well, how weird a concept is this? One of the funny things we found out is that 8-year-olds have no problem understanding the multiverse. It's kind of their parents that you have.
I had a tremendous problem understanding it when I saw it cold, because I'm like, God, they told them, what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, that was the idea, was to make as many different moves as we could, and do things that surprised you and kind of shook you out of your expectations of what a Spider-Man movie was supposed to do.
Exactly, I mean, you're kind of really twisted, as you say, in doing this. And the visual part, as we talked about a little bit, but the color palette of it all, it's not afraid to be gritty. It's not afraid to be dark. It's not afraid to go any which way. Bob, can you talk about that from a visual point of view of the idea behind it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were really inspired by a couple of different things. First, obviously the book we were adapting, which is a comic, and how comics are made, and the way you can be super expressive in comics with either color or the absence of color. And then on the other sort of big push for inspiration was New York itself and everything that's there, and trying to find a way to capture the essence of each borough as a character, and really bring that to the screen in a way that maybe we can do better than a live action film, because we have the ability to really be specific about every single frame that you see up on the screen, and really treat it in a way where every frame has a personality that is reflected in the character that you're seeing in that frame, or is in opposition to that. And we really just sort of pushed really hard on the strengths of animation, meaning it being a visual medium where hundreds of people are crafting every frame. And we tried to bring a personality to every frame, where you feel people's hands on every frame, even though it's a CGI movie, and really just try to imbue it with as much expressivity as expressiveness as possible, and really try to find something that helped support this really unique character that we were all sort of afforded to introduce to the world. It's Miles. This is a very specific, interesting young kid that I think is pretty representative of a lot of kids in the world today, especially in a city like New York. The diversity of it, but also just like his eclectic taste and all the influences that come at him every day, from source music to other visuals that he's seeing in the city. And we try to almost overwhelm you, just try to walk the line of not overwhelming you.
Well, it's so fresh that none other than the New York film critics just voted it the best animated feature of the year, and that doesn't happen with superhero movies or anything like that around, things like this. It shows you've succeeded. I think, in what you wanted to do and making something completely different. Did the studio, I mean, you said they'd let you do what you wanted to do, but did they try to talk you out of it?
They got nervous for sure, but at that point it was kind of too late. They really were supportive. We showed them the concept artwork, and from the beginning we said that we wanted to look like this, but we wanted to actually look like this, not like inspired by this, like the way most concept art is, but like this literally. And they're like, okay, but they didn't realize that that meant all these crazy textures of drawings and things that made it look unusual. And obviously when you're doing something unusual, there's going to be some nervousness because it hasn't been done before. But by the time we showed them the first 3 scenes, it would have been very expensive to go back and do them. So we had a teaser trailer coming out, and people seemed to respond well to the teaser, but they had no idea how crazy we were about to take it. So I will give them a lot of credit for believing in all of us and the vision that we all shared for this thing, as far as what we wanted it to look like.
I think that Amy and Avi and Tom, all recognized that the value of pushing the boundaries and making it as novel as possible and doing things that hadn't been done. It's a really grandiose pitch to go into a studio and say we want it to look like nothing's ever looked before. And I'm sure they were like, okay, sure, that's like a cliche. But, we really wanted to do that.
But the other credit goes to our production designer, Justin Thompson, and VFX supervisor, Danny Damien, who were the guys that we were like, okay, make it look like this, but in 3 dimensions and moving. They both were like, yes, all right, we have no idea how to do that, but let's do it.
We need 10 years of R&D.
It was about a year and a half to sort of figure out how it was actually even going to be accomplished in that matching the 2D, 3D, all new software, and figuring how much of the hand-drawn animation was going to be required to give it that look.
Yeah, it was 2 weeks ago tonight, I ran into Tom Rothman, the head of Sony, he was going, it was like he made this movie. He was going on and, it's never been done, what do you say? I said, I've seen, I know, the whole thing. I mean, he was so excited about this film, so,
He really did believe in it for real, and he saw the potential, and so, go ahead.
Yeah. Now, Peter, talk about the cast here, the voice casting here, and right from Miles, and what you were looking for when you brought all these actors together.
Well, yeah, I mean, going hand in hand with the idea of trying to evoke, an actual contemporary world that you can walk out your door and experience. That's really what we were kind of looking for in all aspects of the movie. And the other thing we had to do was, create in Miles a character that you could go on this crazy journey with. You could understand his motivations. You were rooting for him. He's the idea of a completely new Spider-Man being introduced to the world. I mean, comic book fans know him, but the world at large doesn't know him as well. So we knew we had to create a character that essentially you're going to kind of fall in love with. That you're going to really be rooting for this kid and empathize with him in every way possible. And when we first heard Shameik Moore's voice, he recorded his audition on an iPhone, and we heard it, and we had all been fans of his work in Dope and The Get Down, and I think Chris and Phil had already been thinking, this guy, he's got something, it might work. And we were all kind of like really impressed by his instant vulnerability, his innocence. There was just the kind of truth that came through even over the iPhone that we really wanted for Miles. Listened to a lot of other people, but nobody could come close to that. And the great thing with Shameik is, that I think comes through in the movie, is that he's got really idiosyncratic line readings, and he's just got an eccentric personality that lets you into him in a real specific way that works so well with Miles. And the rest of the cast is just like a dream. I mean, Jake Johnson as Peter Parker is such a, he's witty, he's warm, he's kind of sardonic, but his voice just sonically is just like so comforting and nice. It just sounds like a glass of scotch kind of just like you kids will understand that. A genuinely, he's also a writer, so his working with him in the booth was constant invention and just the little touches that he would add to bring lines to life. Brian Tyree Henry, who plays Jefferson, is just a miracle, and there's no, it's not an accident that guy is in everything now, because he's just a genius. And what he did with Jefferson, I think, we had ideas for the character, obviously, but he embodied those and went beyond them so completely that he just like inflected all the writing, and we just wanted more and more of Jefferson in the movie. Same with Rio, played by Luna Velez, who's like actually Puerto Rican and from Brooklyn, so we had the real deal when we cast her, and she's just an absolute sweetheart. And Mahershala Ali, I mean,
Can't go wrong there.
convincing ourselves. So
Leah Schreiber is your
Leah Schreiber as the Kingpin, amazing. Nicolas Cage, say no more.
Lily Tomlin, Aunt May, they're doing that.
Lily Tomlin, a legend, John Mulaney, and Kimiko Glenn, who plays Penny. Everybody was really at the top of their game. Oh yes, I'd be happy to finally talk about
we
Catherine
haven't
Hahn.
really been able to mention Catherine Hahn,
Exactly.
who is Liv, who is Doc Ock. Because
gigantic.
that's been embargoed for so long because it was a surprise that we had a female version of Ock in the movie, so she hasn't been able to do any, even mention this.
Or Chris Pine, I was interviewing her yesterday.
Yeah.
She said nothing.
That's
Yeah.
right. We wanted to basically
Keep it a secret.
Yeah, and Chris Pine, like having Chris Pine be the first Spider-Man in this movie and not be able to promote that fact is kind of crazy. And also have him sing beautiful Christmas songs.
Beautiful
Beautiful voice.
He got very excited about singing that song.
Yeah.
Come true.
And speaking of music, not just Spidey bells here, but Daniel Pemberton, this is a very complex score. It's got several levels to it, and I love the scratching. All of that. Can you talk about how you decided to do that and the turntable and mix it all up with the orchestra?
Yeah, it is a very complex score. It was a very complicated, piece of music put together. But I was so excited by all the work these guys and everyone was doing on this project. It was so exciting to basically be feeding off that energy of this unbelievable style and this amazing heart to the story. So from a music point of view, it was just being fed the best food you could ever have. And one of the things I wanted to do, because I thought they're pushing it so far with breaking the boundaries in terms of the style and the art, I felt I had to do that with the music. And I was trying to work out how can I approach a film score differently. One of the things I remember was I used to go to hip hop clubs when I was a kid, and I was always super into what you could do with record turntables. And aside from just mixing beats, you could manipulate the sound, and I was always I want to use that one day on the score. And this felt like the perfect way of doing it, because not only have you got Miles is steeped in hip hop culture, he's graffiti tagger, his uncle plays in old school bongo rock records in the subway on a boombox. So I was I want to take that aspect and put that into the score and try and use it as a musical instrument in the same way you use a violin. I want to use a turntable and give it as much importance as a violin or French horn. And so we do things where we record the entire orchestra. Basically, I'd score for orchestra, we'd record it, we'd mix it, then we'd get it put onto the equivalent of vinyl, and then we'd scratch it back in, which was an unbelievably complicated process that I don't want to do very often. But it meant that you could manipulate the sound in a way that, the guy I work with is this PNC scratch champion. He's I've never done or heard anyone try and do anything like this. This is crazy. And that was a way of trying to honor both Miles' character, but also the groundbreaking work everyone else is doing and trying to keep up with them the whole time. Because the whole time I'm trying to keep up with everyone else. Because you've got all this stuff on screen, you're oh man, I've got to feed off this. And so the turntable was a big part of Miles' character, but then you have all these other characters like Spider-Ham, you're trying to be influenced by kind of Looney Tunes kind of old scoring. Then you have noir, and you're trying to take, film noir, and Max Steiner and Bernard Herrmann, and there's so many different ingredients in this. And at the same time, you're also trying to capture the freshness of the take on the superhero film, because you know, we've all seen a million superhero films, and what got me so excited about this was the fact it was not like every other film. But also the emotion, there's such great emotion in this story, and with Miles of trying to give him a theme that builds through the film. Like everyone's got themes. Some of them are like what I call like classic approaches to themes, which is a strong melodic line that, you know, you have this Destiny theme for Miles and a kind of Spider-Man theme that pays off at the end. But then you've also got things like Prowler's theme, which is a very modern take, which is kind of just a noise. And Doc Ock has this kind of weird electronic sound. And it was in the same way of like the art style plundering from every type of art. Musically, I was trying to plunder from every type of music, from hip hop to massive orchestral writing to kind of experimental electronics to like, you know, like Looney Tunes jazz stuff. So I was just pulling from everywhere to try and make this score and keep up with everyone else. It was like running along like a million miles an hour, like shit. So it's oh no, I gotta keep up.
Sounds better than put that. Yeah, in England that's not a Christmas.
Yeah.
Like everything else, though, very innovative. You know, everything you're talking about here is so much innovation. You can just hear it down the line. Let's see what you guys thought. If you have any questions out there, way in the back. Yeah, go.
Daniel, so when you're going through the process and scoring, I imagine scoring to animation is much different than live action. So when the animation is changing or you're getting animatics and you have cues like when Miles is getting chased by the security guard and the drums are like hitting all these incredible moments, like how much of it, like...
I'm glad you noticed that, yeah. Like, I often try and hit as much as possible in a way that you don't think I'm hitting it. I kind of want to write music where you kind of go, hey, he probably didn't do much work on that. That just seems to just fit, and they probably cut it to the music. Yeah, this is the first time I've done an animation, and these guys are like perfectionists and will always change things to make it better, which is really tough, because you're like, make the scene, and they're like, I don't know how we can make the scene better. We can change this thing. And you're like, oh, you're going to totally screw me up here. And I ended up working in like a tiny like box at Sony for a month, and we were like, because there was so much music in this, and you have scenes where it'd be like, you know, the bit where you meet the Spider Gang, and you have like, here's 5 seconds on Spider-Ham, and here's 3.5 seconds on Noir. Now we're jumping to anime pop. Now we're going back to this, and you're trying to make that feel like something that should feel like I'm not working too hard. It just feels like this piece is just running. And then they're like, hey, we decided it works a bit better if we push this. So it was a kind of, I really enjoyed, I mean, I absolutely love this film. I usually snuck in to watch like the last half of this movie because I could watch it over and over again. But it was through us all working backwards and forwards. I was in a room there, in another room around the corner. I mean, I normally work in London, but like for this, I was like, towards the end, I've got to come over here, pull my keyboards and a computer on the plane. Sat in a room at Sony every day till 1 in the morning. Sorry. Phil stole all the, like, at Sony they have these massive, like, cardboard cutouts of other, like, Sony characters. And it became this running joke of how many they steal and put in my room to make my room a bit more fun.
Yeah, Dracula was there.
Yeah, I had Dracula. We had a little leak, and that became a running
Leak
joke.
in the boat.
Like we said, there's a leak in my room.
Okay, let's see, right here.
Hi. I don't know if this leads to a question, but this touched me in a special way that I thought I'd just at least share with you. I'm 58 now. When I was growing up, I read like Donald Duck and DC Comics. And I came to understand the concept of the Earth 2 in the DC Comics. And so that made sense. You had 2 Supermen and so forth. But I felt like that wasn't something other people would understand that I could talk to. And I never had anybody to talk to about comic books. Then I discovered Howard the Duck and then Spider-Man when I was 18 and started reading Marvels and getting all the whole backstory on that. And then started seeing the Ultimate Spider-Man and all this stuff coming out. And I don't really collect now, but I would stop in the comic book shops and read through and just kind of ease that little fear of missing out at the FOMO thing, you know. And so I understand the Spider-Verse also from having looked at those comics. And it's just amazing what you've done here with this, being able to make this accessible to people, because the theme of the movie being you're not the only one. You know, for me, understanding this fandom was a very lonely thing because I didn't have other people to talk to about it. And here, all the stuff that I have points of references to, even the spider buggy, you know, is in this. So that's I guess that's what I wanted to tell you.
And that's good, in case you didn't hear all of that, he's 58 and he hasn't stopped reading comic books, but he loves this. He understands the concept and it sort of brought it together for him to, summarize that. But what do you think when you hear that? Because this movie is for everyone. It's, as they say in the business, a 4-quadrant movie. So.
Yeah, what I think we're really proud about is how, if you are a comics aficionado, there's a lot in this movie. And if you've never read a comic book before in your life, if you've never seen a superhero movie before in your life, it works for you as well. We would test the movie with parents, children, adults who didn't have children, people who were fans of superhero movies, people who were not. And every time people would say, I don't even like this type of movie, but it really landed for me. And we would ask, who do you think this movie's for? And everyone would say, for me. Whether they were 6 years old or if they had kids or not. And it was really special because it was a hard process that we were all doing, trying to slowly lead you into some of the crazier ideas of the multiverse and the other characters, and always keeping it centered on Miles Morales and his family, his story, his journey, because that was in his eyes of seeing this crazy thing, and if we were with him and experienced it with him, then it wouldn't be confusing. It would just be something that we'd be going along for on the ride. And obviously the movie starts pretty intimately in his bedroom, and a very personal moment, and it gets crazier and crazier and crazier and crazier until it seems like it's an acid trip or something, and then it finishes off again alone with him in the bedroom. So it really is lovely to hear that it means something to you, and I think. Thank you.
I think it mirrors the theatrical experience. You're sitting in a room with a bunch of strangers, and when it connects to all of these people at once and in slightly different ways. And that's kind of, we've been talking a lot about Stan Lee last, we just had a junket and it's on everyone's mind. That guy, connected to us through those, remember those like letters to the editor? I mean, the letters from Stan, it would be in the comics. And they would reach out and say like, hey, true believers, it was so engaging. And that's what that guy was like in person. And the power of his writing is that it was so inclusive and welcoming. And that's that's the kind of movie that we wanted to make. And, we wanted to welcome those characters into a kind of a makeshift family together. And we wanted the whole audience to feel the same way.
Yeah. Okay, yes.
Being a Spider-Man movie kind of has two parents, right? I mean, it's not exactly a pure Marvel movie. You've also got Sony Studios. Were there points you can talk about where, I don't know, that there was disagreement or unexpected agreement or having so many parents like trying to nurture this?
He's just talking about cinematic parents here, Sony, Marvel, everybody involved in this. So how did that work creatively?
I mean, by and large, we didn't have a lot of issues with that. There were a few things, Amy Pascal, for instance, one of our producers, also produces the, Homecoming. She produces the live action Spider-Man. So she certainly would be vocal if we were, if there was some kind of conflict that was problematic. By and large, we didn't have that many limitations on what we were doing, and we didn't hear, there are certainly legal things we had to be mindful of, like certain characters you can use or can't use, and that stuff would be, would happen. But we were, in some ways the nice, the Homecoming movies didn't exist when this movie started to be made. Then they were made and they were wildly successful. One advantage of that happening is that it kind of took attention off us for a while. So again, we were just able to really create and not sweat some of that stuff so much. And then by the time attention came back to us, like Chris alluded to, it was just too late to stop us.
Okay, yes.
So first, congratulations to the whole panel on making the best adaptation of Spider-Man on any screen, big or small. This one was significantly best. Second, for Peter, what did it mean for you to bring Miles to the screen?
He's asking Peter what it meant to him personally to bring Miles to the screen in this way.
Yeah, it meant a lot of things. I as a kid, I was a Marvel fan and grew up on those comics and all the, they influenced just so much about the way that I, look at the world and how I think and how I got into art and literature and so many things spring out of that. Like Phil was saying, it's a really, they created a really welcoming, fun way of sort of investigating the world and feeling a lot of feelings. And with Miles, I remember when he was first introduced, I thought it was exciting and really interesting. And he was kind of the first of the wave of what's now like a whole legion of superheroes who are kind of new, diversified takes on iconic characters. And it's, you hear all the time about the importance of representation and diversity, and a lot of time those become buzzwords until you have one of those moments. And it happened to me several times when I'd be sitting in our digital reviews, looking at images on screen. There's one shot in the film where right after Spider-Man tells Miles, you gotta go up and blow up the collider, stick this in the thing and push the button, go on, go. And he climbs up and he promises he's gonna do it, and he climbs up and he's standing there and he looks at it. And I just remember this was really rough pass animation, but there was just something about the shot of this kid who was looking up at this impossible thing he had to do and doubting himself. And it just, I've seen moments like that growing up in so many, whether they were Disney films or, TV shows, little kids having adventures and the world depends on them. And that, seeing Miles, that kid looking like me in that situation, that was something that I almost would never have conceived of growing up. And you start to understand it's a monumental thing to actually be able to participate in a myth and have it be about you while at the same time it's universal. So for me, the importance of Miles is just, I think of the kids, of whatever ethnicity, seeing him now as Spider-Man and empathizing with him as he goes on that journey and living that through his eyes. It means so many things in so many different ways that it's just an amazing thing to be part of.
Cool. Yes.
How much did Stan Lee himself have to do with the process of, say, from the script right on through the production of the film?
How much did Stan Lee have to do with the process through the production of the film, other than his cameo and the fact that he's all over this movie, in different scenes and things? There's Stan Lee, you see him. So.
I mean, I think Stan's spiritual presence and the way that he influenced all of us, it is outside of his scene is his biggest contribution. Just giving us, seeding us with the idea when we were 10 years old that this is something that belongs to everybody, and that it could be any of us behind a mask, and that we could be funny in the face of danger if we wanted to, and that we could be vulnerable and make mistakes, learn from them, and be awkward and too small, and not think we could do it. That to me is the strongest, personally, his lasting legacy and the thing that meant the most to us, making this movie and all of our movies. Stan, these guys were in the room and Stan recorded, and maybe they could speak a little bit to what that was like, but that was his biggest contribution.
And I do think that he was, he's always a very encouraging person, a positive guy. We were lucky enough to meet him on several occasions throughout our career, and every time he always was the same. A lot of ideas, always saying, "You're doing a great job, keep going," and just being an encouraging guy. And so when the idea of this movie and the idea of it, and every time we spoke to him about it, was just positive. Go get him! You're doing great, kid. And that was the spirit of him in the words that he wrote and what he was like in person.
Okay, and got time for one or two more. Yeah, right there.
cutting on the floor, definitely. The first cut of the animatic, the first rough reels, it was a 3-hour-long movie. Yeah, so there were, we definitely had to, it's like getting to indulge in tasting every sort of flavor of ice cream. It seems like a good idea until you're like halfway through and you realize you still have the rest of the flavors to taste. So it really, what it boiled down to was how do you make sure that the movie is constantly, subjective to Miles and also supporting Miles or being an obstacle to Miles. And the people we brought into it were all part of that equation and really that community of whether they were going to be a foil for him or someone to really help champion him in the moments in the movie where he needed it most. And so, yeah, I think going through from the original treatment, actually, every character that you see in there was in the original treatment. So oftentimes in these movies, we kill characters while we make the movie. That didn't happen in this one. And I think they also, that the team that we sort of picked for this medium became a wonderful opportunity to be as sort of diverse in our execution of them as they are in their characterizations. So it was really just a matter of in the same way a comic book is so powerful with one frame, telling as much story as it can and being as impactful. We were trying to do the same thing with the characters that we brought in.
It also begs the question, because I heard this week, Sony's already announcing, I don't know if you've been approached, probably, but sequels and all sorts of things are going on here. So how much do you want to go on and experiment and keep bringing it out and doing different things?
Well, obviously the concept of the multiverse opens the door to sort of infinite possibilities, and a lot of interesting philosophical things, and those stories were not announced. They were leaked.
Leaked.
So maybe we weren't super excited that the stories came about, but
any attention is good attention.
there you go. That's right. But obviously, in working on this, there are a million ideas that we were all discussing that didn't have room to fit in this movie. So there are obviously a lot of opportunities to do this, and with the character set that we selected was to complement Miles, to have everybody have a different point of view on the world and feel like it didn't matter where you came from, what time, whether you were male or female, young or old, what your background was, that you can be a hero and you're not alone, and you can do it too. But also that they were all animated in different animation styles, as Bob was alluding to, the idea of being able to do something in the full anime style, next to something as cartoony Looney Tunes, and next to a black and white noir character.
I was thinking that. I'd love to see that character do a whole
Each one of them, they have their own rich world that they come from and their own style that makes you like, oh, I want to see more of that, and the possibilities are obviously almost endless.
I would say the part of what's most exciting for us is it's not just who would you tell a story about, but it's also how could you keep pushing, just pushing the ideas that we started to develop in this movie visually, where else could those go? If audiences embrace this, then, I feel like it would empower, us to keep pushing into who knows where, as far as different kinds of storytelling or whatever. That's exciting.
Lots of fun. Well, good luck with it. It opens on the 14th. Tell everybody you know, and thanks, guys, for coming out here tonight.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.